It have reached the hour of 5 p.m. I call the April 17th, 2023 Finance Committee and Council Workshop to order and ask the City Clerk call the roll, please.
Committee Member Bavaro is absent. Committee Member Williams as the alternate.
Here.
Vice Chair Escutia Brayton.
Here.
And Chairperson Wright.
Here. Will we all stand for Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll go into public comment. Does any member of the public have a comment on anything that's not on the agenda? And you have 3 minutes. I see no one in person. Any blue cards? No blue cards? No?
No.
Any comment online? Scotty, I didn't see no one raised. Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is new business. Public comment for new business items will be taken at the end of the day. Now I'll turn this over to Joe Lopez, our city manager.
Thank you, Chairman Wright, and good evening, members of the Finance Committee and the community. Welcome to the 2023 Finance Committee budget workshops. Over the last few years, this presentation explained the dire trajectory of our budget and the devastating effects to service delivery to our residents. Thanks to the leadership of this City Council, who unanimously supported placing Measure H on the ballot, and the tremendous trust and support shown by the voters that overwhelmingly approved Measure H, this year's presentation will be much different. This year's presentation represents many of the hopes and dreams that our residents have long held for making Modesto better, and not just a list of cuts, half measures, and band-aids to simply balance an already tight budget. Although we are gratified to have the support of the residents and the voters, this is not a time for celebration. Measure H comes with enormous responsibility to allocate these funds in a manner approved by the voters. I take this responsibility very seriously, and I believe the spending plan you'll see later in the workshop will directly reflect the issues described in our ordinance. To reward our residents and voters for their trust, we have focused early on with quick wins that deal with some of the nagging issues our residents have long been caring about. Issues such as blight, tree maintenance, sidewalk repair, upgrading roads, and repairing our dilapidated parks. Please note that this is not a one-year plan. We need to deal with long overdue preventative and deferred maintenance throughout the city. Our goal is to create a sustainable spending plan that will deal with these ongoing expenses while putting this city on a path to financial resiliency. Today is a new day, and I'm excited to share our plan to finally provide a high level of service our community expects, and one that they certainly deserve. And with that, I will turn it over to Steve, who will give an overview of the budget.
Thank you, City Manager. Welcome, Steve.
Good evening, members of the Finance Committee.
Good evening.
So tonight we're going to start off the workshops with a little bit of budget terminology. So as we go into these workshops this year, you're going to hear presentations from the department. You're going to hear special presentations. We're going to talk about the Measure H spending plan, but we do want to start off kind of giving a little bit of a refresher for some, and maybe this is new information for others about how we make up a department's operating budget. So really, operating budgets are made up of these different categories of spending. So we have Appropriation Unit A, which is our salaries and benefits for a department. That's really made up of things like salaries and wages, health insurance, overtime spending, just all of those salaries and benefits expenditures you would expect for a department as it relates to positions. Appropriation Unit AA, that's our interfund labor. This is kind of a little bit of a strange category. It's when departments within the same fund are charging other departments in the same fund for services, so kind of interdepartment services that they charge. Appropriation Unit B is our internal service fund charges. So these are things like mail services, information technology, liability insurance. We'll talk a little bit more about internal service funds later in this presentation, as well as you will have individual presentations from the departments about internal service funds as we go through these next few days. Appropriation Unit C, those are our discretionary expenses. These are really where the bulk of the work for the departments as they go through their budget building every year is done. These are the areas that they have the most control over. So things like professional services contracts, office supplies, training expenses, conference expenses, repair and maintenance, things like that. That's really where the departments do a lot of their budget building during this process. Appropriation Unit D, that's our transfers out. So transferring out funds from another fund to another fund. A lot of this is done when we have maybe a loan obligation to another fund where we're paying back, or our debt obligations that we transfer out, say from the general fund for the debt obligation on this building, we transfer it out to our debt service fund to make that payment. So again, trying to make up some of that, what makes up our budget as we go through that process. Talking about funds. So city is not just general fund. We have a lot of funds in the city. General fund, obviously, that's our main fund that we use to expend on. It can be spent on anything. There's no restrictions on general fund. Made up of revenues coming in from taxes, sales tax, user utility tax, property tax. We have our utility funds. So again, the water fund, the wastewater fund. Those are really enterprise funds in the utility area. We have internal service funds. So again, we mentioned those. The information technology area. We have the fleet funds. Those are really when we have a department that is charging other departments for a service. So again, like in fleet operations is really servicing all the vehicles within the city. So they're an internal a department doing internal work for other city departments, an internal service fund. We have our debt service fund. So again, funds built to pay the debt for the city. So we have obligations for bond payments and things like that. Our debt service funds would be used for those things. Other funds, this is a numerous category. There's a lot of things that make up that, but grants, surface transportation fund, a lot of other categories in here. Our home, HUD funds, things like that would go under our other funds. For our non-operating funds, we're really talking about our CFDs, our community facility districts. Those would fall into that non-operating fund area. And then finally, our other agency funds. So we have our joint power agencies, so our JPAs, things like TRIP, the Tuolumne River Regional Park, and we have the industrial fire as well. So other agency funds. Again, just talking about all the funds that we have. You'll see kind of a chart later on in this presentation showing the total for a lot of these funds making up the entire citywide budget. So now I want to go into our fiscal year 23-24 general fund draft proposed operating budget. First, I want to start off looking at our proposed revenues going into 23-24. You can see the comparison here, looking at our current year and comparing that to our draft proposed budget. Really across the board here, you'll see a lot of increases. Revenues are looking quite well in the general fund. You'll see the percentages increases on the far right there. Property tax increasing, sales tax, utility user tax. A lot of these are going up across the board. There are some that are decreasing. We have a slight decrease in the construction revenues. Cannabis revenues are going down. A lot of you might have heard me talk about it during the general fund update. Cannabis revenues, we decrease in the current year. That's not reflected on this chart here, but we did decrease them about $1.25 million. And again, you've heard me talk about some of the issues that cannabis is facing in terms of the saturation of the market, A lot of the other surrounding areas now have cannabis dispensaries, so we're kind of seeing that impact in the city of Modesto. So we are adjusting that revenue going forward, and you can see the impacts there on that category. One of the things I do want to point out as well is the ARPA standard allowance. We had $4.5 million that we used in the 22-23 current budget. ARPA has gone away. We're not anticipating using any of the ARPA funds to balance the general fund in the current proposed budget for 23-24. So that's where you see that zeroed out in the draft proposed budget. Overall, $178.1 million in 23-24. I do want to point out, though, that looks like, hey, we don't have a very large increase in our revenues. But if you did remove the ARPA funding and kind of compared apples to apples, we are looking at about a $7.4 million increase overall in terms of our general revenues with property tax, sales tax, UUT, TOT, and things like that. Yes.
You brought up a really good point in that.
Oh.
You brought up a really good point in the fact that the ARPA figure skews. It would be, what do you think if there's an asterisk that explains that? Because I think that's very poignant. The fact that if that ARPA wasn't factored into the 22-23, the variance would be significantly higher.
That's a good point, and I'll make that change for when we do bring this back for council at that presentation.
I think, thank you.
Yep. Just make that note. Okay. So going forward, looking at maybe. There we go. Okay, so looking at the general fund revenue history, you can kind of see where our growth has occurred since 2017-18 actuals going forward through the years. Again, slowing down in the pandemic years of 1920, 2021. But then we really recovered after those pandemic years. And that was beyond anything that we anticipated or estimated, but we had a big increase in revenues in 21-22 in terms of those actuals coming in. Some of that was, I think, just because of the nature of the area that we're in. When you think about other areas or other cities in California, like Anaheim and things like that, that were really dependent upon tourism and people coming in, increasing sales tax and things like that, that wasn't really the situation in Modesto. And we're continuing to see growth in those categories like sales tax, TOT, business license, mill tax. So I think a lot of that may be pent-up spending that was happening during the pandemic is still being or occurring in the city of Modesto. So we are still seeing increases in those areas that are being fairly consistent since the initial growth we saw in 21-22. So we are still seeing that growth occurring here in Modesto. In terms of the expenditures for departments, so yes, revenues are increasing, but expenditures are increasing as well for the city of Modesto. So if you look at it across the departments, you can see the police department, fire department make up a bulk of our spending in the city in the public safety areas. Going down, parks, recreation, and neighborhoods. Community economic development went down slightly, but again, across these areas in the city, $7.9 million in terms of increased expenditures on the total budget for 23-24 when comparing it to the current year. Now, I do want to point out that when you're comparing fiscal year 22-23 to 23-24, our appropriation unit A, which again is our salaries and benefits, went up about $18.1 million. Our appropriation unit B went up about $2 million, so that's our internal service funds, and our appropriation unit C went up $4 million. Some of these categories, salaries and wages went up about $7.3 million, and again, you know, step increases for employees and things like that were occurring. And then we also had pension costs going up, $2.8 million, our unfunded accrued liability, which is our UAL payment, went up about 2.5, so pension alone was almost $6 million. Overtime costs went up, workers' compensation, so overtime 1.4 million, workers' compensation $1 million. So we had a lot of increases across our salaries and benefits. On the appropriation unit C, which is a discretionary category, $4 million, a lot of that was on our fleet operating and maintenance ISF. A lot of that has to do with just the increased cost of parts and fuel. So we're seeing big increases there. I don't anticipate that going down. When you see the fleet presentation later, I'm sure that will be talked about. Just the cost of parts and fuel is increasing. It's really hard to get those parts, and there's a lot of markups going on in those areas. So just wanted to point some of those things out about why we're seeing large increases year over year in terms of our expenditures. Here again, just showing our general fund expenditure history and the increases. In terms of percentages, when comparing the 22, 23 to 23, 24, it's about 4.4% of an increase. This chart here, I just wanted to show the variance that we have between our expenditures and our revenues. So the blue line there is our revenue, and then the red line is our expenditures, and then you can see the different dollar amounts are our actual variances between the two. So you can see the variances for the actual years, and then the last two are budget years. Really what it's showing in the kind of the pre-pandemic years, the strategy that we've implemented is implementing the variance rate. So in the beginning of the budget, we have a variance rate of about 5%, and we do that because we really want to make sure that we take that money off the top as a savings, so then all of that budget can be spent during the year. So when we look back at the earlier slide, or a few slides ago on the expense side, there was a variance amount, a variance rate of 7.5 million. So we take that off the top as savings, anticipating that during the year we'll have about $7.5 million in savings, whether that's across salaries and benefits from vacancies or just expenditure savings on the discretionary side of things, because departments maybe didn't spend their full discretionary budget. So we anticipate that savings ahead of time so we can fully budget the expenditure budget and not have to make reductions or things like that in the beginning of the fiscal year. So that's really benefited us in the past 2017, 18, 19. We get really close to that line of revenue and expenditures being equal. In the pandemic years, it got a little bit wonky just because of the nature of the pandemic. It hit us, it hit everyone really hard, and we didn't really anticipate that coming. So we're trying to get back on track with that in these future years in terms of budgeting that variance rate as we go forward to get that savings in the beginning so we can fully budget expenses and not have to make reductions. So as part of this budget, there are some non-Measure H proposed adjustments. So what that means is that there are adjustments that will be increasing we'll call it the base general fund, so the non-Measure H budget. They're listed here above. So we have some additions to the city manager's office. There's addition of 2 fellowships. The Community and Economic Development Department, there's an addition of 1 business analyst position, and then 1 development services tech and 1 admin analyst. In the finance department, there is the addition of 2 account clerk positions at 0 cost, because those positions will actually bring in revenue to offset the cost of the positions. There's also the reallocation of a part-time account clerk to a 0.75 senior account clerk. So again, offsetting costs by reducing the part-time to that 0.75 account clerk. In the fire department, there is the reorganization for the fire chiefs. These are not the fire chief, but a battalion chief reorg that's going on to restructure that area, there is a minimal cost of $13,400. In the Parks and Rec area, there is some programming additions to the Recreation Division. There is an increase of a .25 position, and there is some revenue coming in to offset that as well as making changes to those programming additions. And there is also the additional funding for the Youth Commission project. Now I'm going over these at a high level, but the departments will be going over these in much more detail in their department presentations. In the non-general fund area, you can see those listed as well. In CED, in the HUD fund area, there's a addition of a community development program specialist. Finance department in the water fund is adding 2 account clerk positions in utility billing. They're also adding a storekeeper position at no cost. This is being funded through some other decreases in expenditures. And then Parks and Rec is adding a .5 lead service worker position. And then Public Works is adding some funding for the concrete recycling operations. And then converting 2 part-time service and maintenance aides into a solid waste outreach specialist, and then adding a heavy equipment mechanic for fleet. So again, they'll talk about those in more detail as they do their department presentations. And they will do it much better justice than I did right now going over them. Question, yes?
Your total FTEs for both these categories are not the final numbers for the collective presentations. It's just a synopsis of your sample size here?
Correct, yeah. So
Okay.
this is the non-Measure H. On the general fund side, they're adding 5 positions in the non-Measure H category. And then across the non-general fund areas, it's a total of 8.75, but they're across various funds there. And again, this is non-Measure H. Measure H is a whole different category, which will have a much different.
But once all the departments complete their presentations to us, their total FTPs cumulative are not going to exceed the Measure H, non-general and non-general fund more than this.
The additions, they'll have their base, let's say CED has 75 positions. If you approve, at the end of this, the Finance Committee approves all of these adjustments for non-Measure H, let's say, they'll go up by 3 positions in the general fund. But we'll have a summary of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
That answered my question. So you're going to have Measure H funds separate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll talk about Measure H in this presentation briefly, and then in the Measure H presentation, we'll have that full detail.
I can check off 5 questions right now.
Yeah,
Just
so just as a point of clarification, our goal here is to make sure that we separate out general fund and Measure H funding. That way, the oversight committee knows where our expenditures are. We want to keep that wall between the 2 of them so that we ensure that Measure H funds are spent on Measure H projects that are, and staffing that is described in the ordinance. So we've done this very purposely to keep them separated.
And do we have a timetable on Measure H, how long we will keep that separation, City Manager?
We don't have any indication of when we would ever change that, if ever. My goal would be to keep them separate because the voters said that they wanted that money dedicated to those tasks.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, much like Offspring.
Just
said,
one question
keep
real
them
quick.
separated.
You talked about fellowships.
Yes.
For the public out there, explain what a fellowship is.
So it's a fellowship. In this case, would be a paid internship. In this case, the interns are college graduates, in many cases with a master's. So they'll be coming from higher education areas or higher education colleges, coming for that paid internship to do a lot of higher level work for the city.
Okay, and a lot of times does that turn into a full-time position for them?
It could if the positions are available.
They're in my presentation, and I'll talk. They're from my CMA, and they're from all over the country. They would reside here for a period of time, and then wherever they decide to take their careers from there. I'll talk about it a little bit in my
Great,
presentation.
thank you.
Okay. So the next part of this, I want to talk about our financial policy on general fund reserves. This is something that we do want to bring forward as a possible change or motion for the committee to make at the end of the presentations and the end of the workshops. So our current policy for the general fund on unassigned reserves and carryover is that we take any unassigned general fund reserves or carryover at the end of the fiscal year, and we apply the 1/3 policy. So 1/3 of it would go to emergency reserves, 1/3 of it would go to the pension trust, and 1/3 of it would go to deferred maintenance. Currently, the GFOA recommends no less than 2 months of our, they say 2 months of our, I'm trying to read my note here.
General
I want to
fund?
get this right. Yeah, but I'm going to make sure I get the 2 months of our general fund operating expenditures should be in our general fund balance. So right now we have $18.4 million in our general fund emergency reserves. If we were to get to our goal of that 2 months amount, it's about $26.4 million. So we're a little bit short. One of the recommendations that came out of a conversation, Councilmember Ricky actually came up with this. I do want to give credit where credit is due. Would be that we change this to a 1/4 policy. So in this case, 1/4 of these unassigned general fund reserves or carryover at the end of a fiscal year would go to emergency reserves, to the pension trust, to deferred maintenance, and then to this innovation fund. So this innovation fund could be putting funds away at the end of the year to be used to make Modesto better. So putting it away to attract businesses or improve the economy of Modesto and attracting things to make the city that place to be. So that's what the idea behind putting some funds away for this innovation fund. So if a business wanted to relocate to Modesto and maybe we had some funds in here to help build that infrastructure to attract them, then maybe funds in this innovation fund could be used for that. Because right now we currently don't have anything like that. Or any other ideas that the council might have for use of this innovation fund.
Are we anticipating about how much those funds would be the total for the carryover that we would put towards a, you're going to do that later?
Yeah, we'll come back at the end and
Okay.
have a slide that shows you where our recommendations are for all those things to be moved as a specific motion from the finance
Okay,
committee.
thank you.
So now on to Measure H. So just kind of a general overview. November 8th, the voters approved Measure H as a 1 cent sales tax for general city services. On November 29th of 2022, council certified the election results. The Measure H sales tax started its collection on April 1st of this year. The additional revenue is estimated at $41.8 million annually. The initial quarter from April to June of this fiscal year is estimated to generate $10 million in revenues. Council adopted an initial spending plan on February 14th of 2023. This obligated $4.48 million of the initial $10 million that's to be collected in fiscal year 2023. The fiscal year 2024 draft proposed budget includes a spending plan that will potentially obligate revenues from the annual estimated Measure H amount that the city is expected to receive during 2024 fiscal year. So looking at the Measure H revenue sales forecast, you can see over the next 5 years, the revenues are anticipated to grow to about $45.5 million in 2027-28, In the first year, 22-23, you can see the $10 million, and then the yellow box there is the $4.48 million that was obligated for the initial Measure H spending plan. That left about $5.5 million remaining from that initial amount. That would carry over into the new balance for the first fiscal year, the first full fiscal year in 23-24. Looking at the chart, we're averaging about $43.6 million over the next 5 fiscal years. One thing you can see on this chart is that those red boxes are our structural deficit, our structural budget deficit in the general fund that's estimated over the next 5 years. That's going to reduce the revenues from Measure H by approximately $7.5 million annually. And one thing I do want to note is that that amount will change depending on what happens, like in this year with labor negotiations that are still ongoing. So that would obviously increase the amount in this current fiscal year and beyond if the contracts are more than one fiscal year, which most likely they would be. So that is something to take into consideration when you're looking at that chart in front of you and the ongoing structural deficit. For the Measure H spending plan overview, again, this is just an overview in this presentation. There'll be a lot more detail that will be provided when we do the Measure H spending plan presentation on probably Wednesday. We'll get to that one. The initial spending plan on the top there, we had one-time costs or one-time obligations of $1.25 million. Ongoing, there was about $3.2 million for the total $4.47 million. In the Measure H spending plan that we have going forward in this proposed budget, there's $18.75, let's call it $18.8 million of one-time cost. Ongoing costs of about $8.4 million for the total of $27.1 million. And really the idea in this first year is to have a lot more one-time costs in the beginning with less ongoing costs, because we really want to front load those one-time infrastructure improvements, maybe equipment costs, one-time things we really want to upload in the beginning. And then, you know, kind of as we go along, I'll use my hands here, probably people can't see it online, but as we go along, those ongoing costs will kind of go, maybe creep up more where our one-time costs will go down. So it would have been better to show that on a presentation, not my hands crisscrossing.
It's an X.
Yeah, an X, there you go. I feel like a wrestler or something. Anyway, so really again, the idea is to have these one-time costs being higher up front, and then gradually those will go down. You'll notice that we're not spending that full amount in the beginning, and really the idea behind that is that we want to have some of those funds left over in fund balance, because there are going to be future deferred maintenance costs that we'll want to keep some of those funds away for deferred maintenance costs on these new infrastructure improvements that we're making, because we got to have a way to make sure that those are being taken care of in the future. The second chart there you can see is the categories of expenditures that we have and the dollar amounts that are going to each. You can really see here that we are making large efforts in those categories that were approved along with the Measure H as types of expenditures. So parks improvements, right up there, number one, $10.4 million. Public safety, you could really throw in the public safety and the fire EMS as the two things going together. So, you know, over $10 million there as well. Forestry, equipment, sidewalk improvements, blight, homelessness. So again, you see a lot of these categories that went along with the Measure H ordinance. One of the bullet points on the top there, I do want to mention that with this, there will probably be about $14.1 million after the proposed spending plan obligations. But again, that dollar amount could go down depending on labor negotiation contracts as well. So that's not factored into that $14.1 million, because depending on what the outcome of that is, that could decrease. Just want to point that out. So, other major funds. We're not just the general fund in the city. We do have other major funds. The water fund has operating expenses of $67.3 million. Wastewater fund, $48.7 million. Solid waste, $16.7 million. Surface transportation funds, $15.3 million. Storm drainage, $8.4. And then the capital improvement support fund, $5.8. These are just some of our other major funds. I will show you a chart later on that shows a breakdown of pretty much all of our funds. But again, just kind of showing where we're at in terms of our 23-24 proposed budget for our other major funds compared to the general fund. Internal service funds. So again, internal service funds, these are established for internal departments that provide goods and services to other internal departments within our organization. They really work on a cost reimbursed basis. So the services that they're providing are reimbursed through revenues collected from the other funds in the city. You can go through and kind of see our beginning fund balances, the current budgets, and then what our proposed budgets are in 23-24. One of the things I do want to point out, you can see on the fleet side, that's our fleet operating fund. It shows a negative balance, but fleet includes all the fleet funds, so it's not really negative. That's just the one fleet operating fund. For our fleet fund, it includes different roll-ups for our fleet replacement funds and our general fund fleet replacement fund. So really the total fleet funds are in the positive $2.25 million. So we're not really negative overall in the fleet funds. That's just the fleet operating fund. On the ISF funds, we will have presentations that we'll go through later on during the next few days that will go through how the funds work, kind of what they're made up of, what they're charging out, and kind of their methodology for how they charge out as well. So there'll be much more detail on the internal service funds to come. Here's our chart I was talking about. A little bit small on the screen. See it a little bit better on your paper, hopefully. But this is our total funds, all funds in the city. The total amount for the city, $525.97 million. This chart here includes the proposed Measure H spending plan. So that's about $27.1 million. So you can see here a lot of funds in the city. We have insurance funds, which again house our health insurance costs, dental insurance, vision insurance, our liability insurance, ISF, our CFDs, all of our inventory purchases funds, our other special revenue and grant funds, the golf funds, various funds across the city. And then the last thing I'll leave up, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions you have, is just kind of the overview of the schedule. Again, the 17th through the 19th, we just did the overview presentation. We will have charter offices, department presentations, special presentations, and then we will, any questions that we can't answer during the presentations, we'll take note of those and we'll bring those back on Wednesday and we'll answer those. And then we'll also have committee recommendations at the end.
Great, thank you, Steve.
Yep.
Thank you, Steve.
Any questions from committee members?
No, Mr. Chairman. Go ahead.
I just have a super easy question. The slide you just referred to, the small one, how many, that's the total of all funds?
Correct.
Yeah, so there's 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 to 7 to 8 to 29 funds.
There's more than that. Some of them are grouped together. Do you know offhand of how many? I can get you the number of how many funds we have in the city. It's changed since we had it last time.
It's significantly more than 29?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, the city's total operating
Yes.
expenditures is almost $526 million.
So the total
That's correct.
Monetary amount doesn't change?
No.
But the number of funds, okay.
That it?
Yes, thank you.
Councilman Williams, go ahead.
No questions.
I do have
Thank
a
you.
couple of questions. Take me through the process on each department setting down, putting their budgets together. Does each department have their own accounting persons in there that help with the budgets, or is it a combination of the departments and finance? So walk us through that.
Yeah.
Oh, I would like to know personally.
So some departments have analysts that will help them, their department build their budget. So the larger departments will typically have an analyst or two that will help them with their department budgets, building their C part of it, checking their appropriation unit A, their position counts and things like that, and really help them build their budgets. Some of the smaller departments do not. So they'll rely more upon the budget division to help them build their budgets, check their numbers, things like that. That's where we become more involved in helping the departments. And we help out the larger departments too when they need it. So really it's kind of a mixture. The larger departments will have an analyst or two to help them build their budgets. Smaller departments will rely more on the budget division to give them some help, which is fine.
Okay, and then on the structural deficit, do you see that the innovation fund could be a fund that would help offset our structural deficit? In that it helps bring in new business or into the city, which helps our general fund.
Yes, so I think that would be kind of a goal of it, is that hopefully the innovation fund would be a way to maybe drive some economic activity for the city, which then, like you said, would increase some of those general fund revenues, whether it's sales tax, TOT, business license, mill tax, but increase those revenues to where that revenue increase is offsetting some of the expenditure increases that we're seeing.
Because that's the only way that we're going to grow our general fund minus H.
Right.
Measure H is either new business or new subdivisions going in to property tax or whatever.
Correct.
To help our deficit. And then on your CFD fees of 6.5 million, how many CFD funds do we have?
I can find out.
How about we'll report back that information
Yeah,
at the
I
end?
have it
Okay,
right here. I just
that'll
gotta
be great.
make
If you
sure.
you can email me that separate or bring it back at the end, that'd be great.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, Steve. Thank you. Any other questions from the committee members?
I'm good.
No, sir. Thank you.
No? Okay, we'll move on to the next presentation. And I think that is Police Department. Public comments at the end. I already announced that. So just for clarification, I want to hold all public comments to the end of all the presentations, and we'll come back at the end later tonight and ask for all the public comments. Thank you.
Great. Well, good evening, committee members. Brandon Gillespie, Police Chief. And tonight I'm going to provide an overview of the Modesto Police Department, the structure and the budget as it stands. So looking at the department overview, there we go. The police department is broken down into 3 divisions. We have our operations division, which consists of all of our, if you just think of it, of our uniformed patrol officers that go and handle calls for service to the general public, our traffic unit, as well as other functions. But it's mainly the black and white patrol cars that you see patrolling the streets of Modesto, which are going to consist of our operations division. Our investigations division, if you think of anything that patrol officers can't handle and they need to go be followed up by a detective, that falls into our investigations division. Along with our investigations division is also where we house our alternative response units. So if you think about our chat team, our park rangers, and things like that, that also is where we house those resources as well. And then finally, our support division, which is our records division, mostly, and it oversees all of our technical administrative, our IT department that we have, and assures that our department operates effectively and efficiently 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. As far as our department priorities and goals for the upcoming year, we've had these three main overarching goals for our department for quite a few years, and I see no reason to change them. The combination of these three goals really is what we use to make our city better. So reducing crime and the fear of crime is one of our primary goals. And as it states, it's not just actually reducing crime, which we've done a good job of year after year of reducing that crime, but also the fear of crime. If people perceive that there's a high crime rate, even if there's not, that goes to the overall perception of our city and their quality of life. Increasing community engagement. We don't do this alone. We don't operate and police a city by ourselves. That becomes an occupying force. We want to do this together with our community. So community engagement is one of our primary goals as well, to continue to provide outreach, develop relationships, and really engage with our community so they know who we are. And then finally, promoting organizational excellence. Modesto Police Department is a learning organization, and we'll constantly work to make our organization better. We'll constantly work to improve the training, the knowledge, the expertise of our officers and our staff at every level in our organization, and just become a better police department through that goal as well. When we look at the priorities under those three overarching goals, here are just some of the highlights of what our goals are for the 23-24 fiscal year. On the forefront is really to fill all of our vacancies. I know we've talked a lot about the continual structural issues and budget that the city has had, and that has affected the police department. And so we currently have 20 sworn vacancy positions, and my goal is to make sure that we fill all of our vacant positions within the police department. Increasing the staffing in our traffic safety unit is important. And I know that was reflected with the community that we constantly hear with the traffic issues all over our city. So increasing the traffic safety unit is an absolute priority. Creating an area command division to further enhance our community-oriented policing is something that I want to achieve this year or the next year. And what that is going to allow us to do is really take each area of our city. We divide our city into 4 area commands, and really go after and address the issues that are specific to those areas of our city, and develop better relationships by having consistent people in those areas. Expanding alternative response unit, talked about that, and expanding our camera programs throughout the city as well. So I won't go through all of these, but these are really the top goals that we have up in this upcoming fiscal year to create a better police department and a more engaged police department. The organizational chart and staffing, you can see this is the org chart and the breakdown of those 3 divisions that I talked about, and the specific units that sit under each one of those divisions in our department. When you look at our staffing and the overall breakdown, this is where both sworn and non-sworn personnel, this is where they fall into. Our field operations is our largest division, our patrol division, with 144 allocated positions to that. And that includes not just our patrol officers, but supervisors, lieutenants, the captain, all the way, anyone sworn in that division, as well as our non-sworn positions. Investigations is all our detectives, like I said, which has a lot of support staff as well, and then our support division, which is heavy on our non-sworn because that consists of our records division as well. Looking at it another way, you can look at our just a different way to look at it, but our non-sworn, the majority of those fit in our support division. The majority of our sworn sit in our field operations. This is another way to look at that breakout.
Chief, what is the number for our sworn that should be as far as officers are?
So our allocated sworn is 210. In the current budget year, we have 8 frozen positions, so the fillable allocated positions is 202.
Thank you.
This just shows a graph of our, going back to fiscal year 07 to this current upcoming fiscal year. It shows the city of Modesto population, if you can see that gray line there, And then it shows the blue line is our allocated sworn positions, and the green line is our allocated civilian positions or non-sworn positions. So you can just see throughout the years, the hit has been taken in staff personnel, and that is where we currently sit at that 210 sworn allocated positions and 121 non-sworn. When you look at our department revenues, the police department is not a heavy generating revenue department, but I did want to go through the revenues that we do bring in. So if you look at the last 5 fiscal years, the big jump that you're going to see in the 19-20 fiscal year is just due to the CARES funding offset that we were reimbursed for our law enforcement specific salaries. That was kind of the anomaly there. But then you can look at the revenues through the rest of the year along with the proposed in the upcoming fiscal year. And really what that breaks out, the major revenues that we bring in, Prop 172, we bring in just under $1 million, $975,000 is what we're estimated for the upcoming fiscal year. Grants is another thing that as a revenue that we get from grants. We have an Office of Traffic Safety grant, which is usually around $400,000 to $450,000. We have other BJAG grant, burn JAG grant that we usually get between $120,000 to $140,000 per year. Our abandoned vehicle abatement, which is about $225,000, that brings in a year. Our franchise tow contracts, about $225,000. Outside work agreements, so when people hire police officers, that revenue comes in at about $380,000. And then it kind of dwindles down from there. I think what's important to realize that I want to point out in these revenues is that most of these revenues, it's not extra money coming in, it's mostly offsetting. So our outside work agreements, we're paying our police officers to do these outside work agreements, but the revenue is coming to offset what we pay for those. And the same thing with abandoned vehicle abatement. We bring in money, but we also pay full-time salary for a community service officer and several part-time police assistant positions to work in that unit. So this isn't just, we wouldn't have these services if we didn't have this revenue, but this isn't extra revenue to go hire police officers or something to that effect. Other funds that we have is we have the Traffic Safety Fund, and that comes from traffic safety fines. The important note there is it cannot be used to hire officers. It's usually to be able to purchase things and stuff for frontline police services related to traffic-related issues. And we've used those in the past for cameras. If it goes on a roadway, it helps with reducing traffic collisions or improving traffic safety. We can use that. We've used it for other equipment like that, motorcycle equipment for our traffic unit, things like that. Our Traffic Offender Fund is a portion of vehicle release fees that come from offenses such as DUIs and other driving offenses. That we do currently have one of our traffic officers funded out of this fund. And then we use also for general police operations, we're able to use some revenue out of there for that as well. Looking at department expenses, this is their department expenses over the last 5 fiscal years. And as you can see, the light blue is our breakdown of our A's, our salaries and benefits, our B's, and then our C's, our discretionary funds. So when you look at our A's, the majority of the increase that you see from last fiscal year to this is, a lot of it is PERS, as well as the hiring incentive that was approved to try to recruit new officers. And those are really the 2 biggest increases in our A's from last year and the proposed this year. So when we look at our B's, which is our ISFs, really the increase there is we're looking at our liability insurance and IT ISFs. And then when you look at our C's, which is our discretionary fund, I think the important thing there is while it's called the discretionary fund, most of these are contracts and services that the police department contracts with. When we look at our fleet as one of the ISS that comes out of our C's. When we look at our contracts for our body cameras, we look at contracts for any contracts we have, all come out of our C's. SR 911, animal services, what we pay to the animal shelter, all of those come out of our Cs.
What comes out of B again?
Bs are the ISFs, the inter-service funds, so what we pay for different department transfers, like city manager.
Like workers' comp, workers' comp, liability, fleet, those kinds of
Okay.
things.
Yeah. So those are other expenses that we have is the traffic safety fund as well. And you can see the revenues there. And like I said, one of them was to help, the traffic offender fund helps offset the cost of a police officer, and not just addition to salary, but salary and benefits. So that takes up a lot of that cost. And then we use the traffic safety fund for other equipment that we can reduce accidents and improve road safety. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions from the committee?
I do have a question, if I may. Thank you, Chair. This speaks more to your org chart and your staffing pages. I understand from Steve's presentation, much of the Measure H monies are going to be dedicated, at least initially, to one-time expenditures. But whether Measure H funding or not, what are your anticipated modifications to staffing, and what does that look like? I'm curious why you didn't address that in this stage.
So we're really intentionally keeping these two things separate. So the initial general fund that you're going to hear from all the departments tonight are just our standard baseline general fund budget. We're going to come back later on Wednesday and talk about Measure H and how those two things will marry together.
Okay, I see. So originally, right now, just baseline.
This is
Okay.
just our normal
Okay.
standard general
Okay.
fund budget with no modifications unless specifically shown by the department.
Okay. The general introduction of Measure H in the first presentation threw me off. Okay.
Yeah, that was your overview.
Overview.
We were teasing you to get you excited for what was to come.
Okay. I see.
But this is just a general, because then you're going to want to be able to put the two things. You want to see Measure H in its totality.
Okay.
And then you'll want to be able to tie the two things back together.
So we're going to come back and address the same departments, but now focusing on Measure
Correct.
H specific.
He'll have a whole presentation on his own Measure H expenditures.
Beautiful.
Anticipation.
Okay.
There's a song called Anticipation.
We want to make sure you guys are paying attention on the edge of your seat, so that's what we're here for today.
Definitely paying attention, and she was referring to page 21 from Steve's presentation, and I was looking at the very same thing, that the numbers didn't match up, but thank you for that clarification,
Okay.
City Manager.
Yeah, and I think really just I want to show that there is a proposed increase in just our regular budget, and a lot of that is just driven by the typical increase in salaries and benefits as that increases every year, and then see if there's any questions on, like I said, some of those Cs include an expected increase with SR 901, the animal shelter, utilities is always going up, things like that. Even though we try to keep this as flat budget as we can without any of those enhancements, wanted to call out what that increase is.
Chief, I'm curious on your budget, how much of it's spent percentage-wise on fuel?
That is a good question that I would have to talk with Bill, but.
Yeah,
We'll
so make a
report-
note, yeah.
we'll report
I'd
back on
just
that.
be curious to see how much. I know
Yeah.
fuel costs has gone way up.
Yeah.
I know it does have an increase. Any
Absolutely.
other questions from council members or?
No, sir.
committee members? Okay, thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Next, we'll have the fire department. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you. All right, good morning, or good afternoon, or evening. Wow,
Good night.
yeah. Chair and council, Alan
I
Ernst.
thought
Fire
that
Chief.
clock said 12 o'clock, and I sort of,
Yeah,
like, wait a minute.
I'm Alan Ernst, Fire Chief, proud to be here today to present our budget presentation for fiscal year 23-24. see if I can get this clicker to work. Am I going the wrong way? There we go. All right. So a quick overview of the fire department. Much like the police department, we're really broke down into three major operations. It's our emergency operations. That provides that core emergency services to our community. That's where all our fire engines, emergency medical technician, water rescue, hazmat, and the water rescue services come from. And we're the first responders to emergencies and non-emergency calls for service. Then we have our community risk reduction division, and that provides the enforcement of the fire code, plan checks, public education, fire inspections, and really growing the community risk portion of the department, where we're looking at trends in the future and what we can address early to hopefully prevent emergencies going forward. And then we have our business operations division, and that provides all the logistical and technical administrative support to those other two divisions. They oversee the personnel matters, including hiring, promotion, and workers' comp. And they play a vital role in assuring that the fire department continues to operate effectively 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. As you are aware, we also provide several contracted service agreements throughout the county. We now serve 6 of the 9 cities in the county and 4 fire districts with just under 500 square miles of responsibility as a fire department. We provide a City of Oakdale with a full service contract, and you can see the dates off to the right are with these contracts are due to expire. So the good news is we have plenty of time under our feet for these contracts, but it's good through 2027 for Oakdale. The Oakdale Fire Protection District is the same. It's a full service contract. Little explanation between what a full service contract and an administrative contract is. Under the full service contract, that means our firefighters are actually staffing their fire engines in their communities and running those emergencies. Under our administrative contract, myself acts as the fire chief of those agencies, and we have other administrative support, but the employees of those agencies are of that agency. So with City of Ceres, it's a full service contract running through 2026. Stanislaus Consolidated Fire Protection District is an administrative contract through 2027. City of Turlock is administrative contract as well through 2027. And this year we incorporated the Salida Fire Protection District full service through 2027. So the priorities and goals for the fire department really are in 3 different buckets, and they're very similar to what we went and discussed with the community for Measure H, and that is under service level to the community is expanding the ALS program and work with AMR and the county and our local emergency service agency for support with that, to continue to try to improve response times, continue our current collaborations and partnerships, and explore future regionalization opportunities. Health and wellness of our members and our employees is always very important and priority. So maintaining adequate staffing levels and reduce the mandates that they have to work, address safe working conditions and consecutive work hours, invest in behavioral health program and our cancer reduction programs. And then obviously addressing our critical infrastructure needs, the deferred maintenance that we've seen over the years. Station 1 is an absolute priority, and you'll see in a future slide the average age of all of our firehouses is about 47 years old. So we have a lot of deferred maintenance to make up. So on this slide, you'll see our org chart. It's broken down to those divisions you saw before. You have myself as the fire chief. We have 2 assistant chiefs that handle the majority of the day-to-day operations of the contract agencies. Those are both supported financially by those contract agencies. Then we have deputy chief over business operations, deputy chief over emergency operations, deputy chief that supports the Turlock contract that is compensated by the City of Turlock, and the deputy chief over community risk reduction, and then the staff that falls below that. This is a little snapshot of history going back to 2014. What it really doesn't show is after the recession, after 2008, our staffing levels within the city of Modesto were approximately 200 firefighters. And you can see the blue line, the tall light blue line, is what the staffing is today within the city of Modesto. And then the others are broke down into the contract agencies, what is grant funded. We have 9 firefighters on a SAFER grant, and then we have 16 non-sworn. So currently we're at 137 sworn firefighters within Modesto, and with our contracts, we're at a total of 216. This is just a breakdown of how that staffing is distributed between our administration, suppression, our contract cities, training staff, et cetera. So we'll dive into the revenues and expenditures. And then this slide, it's kind of an overview, and hopefully kind of will explain a little bit what you've heard from the other, from Steve, and you'll hear from other departments, is a breakdown between what are A appropriations, B appropriations, and C's. Again, A's are where the majority of our costs are with salaries and benefits. The B appropriations are those ISFs that are determined for those internal service fees. And then our C appropriations is really the area that us as departments and directors have somewhat control over. However, there's several agreements that are tied to those, like SR 911 and fleet. And so through the years, you can see a steady increase. A lot of that has to do with the contracts that we've added. So when you see increases in expenditures that dramatic as well as revenue, it's because of the contracts that we've absorbed over the last several years. Again, the revenue pays for those contracts, so you'll see an increase in revenue and increase in expense. The delta between that is where we start getting into the PERS costs, the normal salaries and benefit increases we see year to year, inflation, and other factors. And this just breaks those expenses down further into departments, and it shows those revenues as well. Again, our operations division is our largest division. It also includes the contracts for Ceres, Oakdale, Salida, our special operations division, and investigations. So you see that large number, that's what the majority of our personnel are assigned to, and that's why those numbers are there. The next one is our business operations division. Again, the majority of the expense in this is the salaries attached to the personnel assigned, as well as the contracts and C appropriations that we have to facilitate. So the business operations is the division that handles all the procurement, purchasing, contracts for the department, and that's why you see those expenses there. The anomaly you see in revenue in 2021 and 2022 is from, as we go out of state or out of county on mutual aid strike teams, it creates an expense, but it is compensated, and there's actually a little benefit financially back to the organization for that. So that was a very busy year. We sent a lot of firefighters out to help other communities during the wildland season. Our community risk reduction revenues and expenditures, you can see this as well. We have expanded this division a little bit through the contracts, so that's why you'll see the increase in 22, 23 in the current budget and the proposed. With the addition of the Ceres contract, we added personnel to that, to the fire prevention at the expense of the city of Ceres to handle the Ceres fire prevention responsibilities. And we do have one non-measure, well, it's technically two non-measure H adjustments. And this is pretty much a cleanup from when we did the contracts of service, right-sizing our structure. The two assistant chiefs you saw in our org chart, those were deputy chiefs that we just gave an incentive pay that was non-PERSable to them to function in that role and to align with industry standards, departments like ours. For recruitment purposes and retention, we want to make sure we classify that as an actual position within the city and have that salary schedule for that. So that's really a no-cost item because we'll have the salary schedule. We'll move them into that salary schedule, those employees, and they will no longer receive the incentive pay for that. And so that's why you see that net zero there. The deputy chief, we have a battalion chief that has been acting in deputy chief roles and responsibilities, getting an incentive pay again. And so we're asking to reclassify that battalion chief to a deputy chief, remove the incentive pay, and there's a slight difference of $13,000 for that. So those are the two adjustments that we have pushed forward for the fire department. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions from committee? Council member?
Yes.
Go ahead.
First of all, I don't know if you were acknowledged for your nomination, your California training officers, that the Berninici Award, is that how you pronounce that?
Yeah, the Bernasini Award.
Bernasini Award, and for all of your innovation along with your team. And I don't think we had the opportunity to acknowledge your accomplishments and your award for that. So we thank you for all the hard work. I think they were saying that, you know, you should stay another 4 or 5 more years. So again, congratulations.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. It was truly a team effort from all of us, including the council.
I have a couple of questions, Chief. You know,
Yes.
last year we talked about billing for fire services and
Yes.
ambulance service. Have we, I think we started that, correct?
Correct. We did take a pause to make sure there was some complications with the billing company and zip codes, and to make sure, because we only have authorization within the city of Modesto to do that from council action. And unfortunately, when we first started rolling out the program, because we responded to so many different jurisdictions, the billing company was sending those invoices to communities outside of our jurisdiction. So we had to take a pause, get that fixed, organized, and we'll be reinstating that here real soon.
So our full service contracts, do those cities have to approve billing also, or are they part of our approval here because they're really our employees?
So the full service contracts is still the local jurisdiction's authority to approve any kind of increases, fees, or billing. And so how we operate those contracts is we charge them a set determined amount for 5 years. And if they want us to bill for them, they'd have to get authority from their council and enact it just much like we did here.
Have we pursued that with their council? Have we brought that up to their council?
Well, I haven't brought it up to their councils. I brought it up to their city managers and the board presidents, and that's a decision that they have to make internally. It doesn't change our payment structure. It would only help them financially recover.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then also too, on our full service contracts, what is the, what's the word I want here? Are we having some good results with our full service contracts with our other cities?
Yes.
Are they liking what we're doing?
Yes, so we have quarterly ad hoc committee meetings with the contracting agencies, and we get together. Obviously, I meet with them regularly, but we've had nothing but positive comments on the very appreciative level of service they're seeing in their community. The contract structure and pricing has worked very well for all of us. Like I said, a large portion of our organizational chart from the administration is actually funded through the contracts. Now, we do provide a whole lot of work for those contracts, so it compensates for that.
And then also on the administration services, are you seeing that those agencies may become full service?
I think there's always opportunities there. We have discussions, but again, those are discussions that just take time to develop and make sure that we do it the right way and everybody's in agreement before we move forward, and we're making good headway there.
And do you see with our full service contracts, we have better service for all of our full service cities due to the fact that we're almost linked together?
Correct. So the best part of our contracts is the depth of service that we have for all of us. For example, Modesto, at our height, even when we had 200 firefighters in the city of Modesto, we only had about 15 companies that could support operations within Modesto. And so if we had a large incident, it's not too uncommon that we have multiple fires going on at the same time. We would be stripped of apparatus, and we would no longer be able to respond to medical calls or other calls. With this agreement, we now have 34 companies all sharing responsibility and territories. There's no borders, and we're sending the closest unit to every emergency and backfilling and covering. And since we've started this endeavor, we have not had to not respond to any call.
Great, fantastic. I'd like to acknowledge that Councilmember Eric Alvarez is in the chamber with us today. I'm glad he's here. And Eric, do you have any questions for the chief?
No questions. Thank you for the acknowledgement.
Thank you.
I do have a quick question.
Go ahead.
And I know there's no dumb questions, but my question is, on your slide that speaks to revenues and expenditures, the expenditures far exceed the revenue that comes in. So how does that work?
Yeah, all we're trying to show in that chart is how much revenue comes in that department versus how much we spend. The remainder is covered by the general fund revenue that comes in that you see spread out across the organization. So each
Okay,
department
so it's offsetted by the general fund revenue?
Correct.
Okay.
Most departments generate some form of revenue through various billing activities or like charges for service and things like that. But the remainder of it is covered by the general fund expense.
And this is just the nature of doing this work, and
Correct.
it's no different in any other municipality?
Correct.
This is just the way fire departments are set up. The expenditures exceed revenue. You're not a revenue building entity, but it's offset in balance with the general revenue.
Correct, yeah. The revenue we receive from property tax, sales tax, all of that goes in to feed the general fund, which we are a part of. We're just breaking down what our department revenue is that helps support that general fund revenue.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chief.
okay, thank you.
Parks and Recs. Lori Smith.
Good evening, Chair
evening.
Wright, members of the Finance Committee. Lori Smith, Director of Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhood. Let me see here. We're going to start with the department overview. First, let me start out by saying that the Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhoods Department mission is to serve the citizens of Modesto through quality recreation programming, welcoming community centers, active neighborhood engagement, and a variety of cultural awareness events, inviting destinations and attractions, and planning and operation of the city's vibrant parks and trails system. We have 4 divisions: administration and facilities, recreation and neighborhood services, park operations and maintenance, and parks planning and development. And you can see on the slide what each of those areas are responsible for. Administration and facilities is a little unique in that it's kind of a combination of functions that don't fit in any of the other divisions. We oversee day-to-day operations, the guest services, which is the reservation system. We also oversee operation of the Center Plaza, the contract with the Mariners, the Nuts for operation of John Thurman Field, contract management of Brightview and Kemper for operation of the golf courses, etc. You can see our Recreation and Neighborhood Services division is responsible for operation of our community centers. They run a variety of recreation programs listed on the slide. They're responsible for community outreach and our neighborhood association liaisons, as well as overseeing Culture Commission and Youth Commission. Our Parks Operation Division is responsible for parks maintenance, repair, trail maintenance, tagging abatement, landscape management, contract management, vegetation management, fire. I won't go through each one of these. Parks planning and development, they're responsible for planning of current and future parks. They manage our grants and funding, capital improvement. They also oversee the functions of Tuolumne River Regional Park and cell tower leases. You can see those. So we'll talk a little bit about our department priorities. By the entire department, we recently, and I'll talk more later, completed a fund development and implementation strategy. We plan to hit on that very briefly during these presentations in the next few days, but bring that back to you during the year in more detail. We've also been working in the last 12 to 18 months on succession planning in the department. Some of that work has been done, but we'll be continuing it. We're also planning to continue our partnership with Building Services on our facility maintenance and safety plan. And of course, the big one is the Measure H funding priorities and action plan, which goes in each of these areas. This year, we're working on our contract agreement with the Nuts and Mariners on John Thurman Field, which include, of course, Major League Baseball standard requirements. Dryden Clubhouse at Dryden Golf Course is finally going to be, construction begin. I won't say it's going to be completed, but it will begin this year. We're working with the Modesto Cruisers on an MOU for use of one of our soccer fields. And then we are also partnering with CED on the study that's currently underway regarding Muni Golf Course and other sites throughout the city and downtown. You can see what the rest of these priorities are. I won't read all of them. We're working on MOUs with the Mansion Foundation as well as the Historical Society. We continue to work on reorganizing the department. Our park operations and parks planning teams will be very busy with Measure H, as well as the other items listed on this slide. Am I going backwards? Yes. Let's not do that. All right, let's get down to it. The department's org chart. So we have 63.75 positions and over 300 part-time positions that support our department. 11 of those are in facilities and maintenance, and I've already described what each of these divisions do, but these positions are housed at the Center Plaza, the Mansion Museum, and our guest services. Our recreation division has a manager, 2 supervisors, 6 3/4 rec coordinators, as well as an analyst. Our park operations division has 35 positions, which includes 1 manager, 3 supervisors, 4 mechanics, and quite a few maintenance workers as well as groundskeepers. This division recently received 9 additional positions. You'll recall in the quick wins for Measure H that were approved back in February. And then we have 6 positions in our parks planning division, which include a manager, 4 parks project coordinators, and an analyst. And this is what it looks like in a pie. So you can see that most of our positions are funded by the general fund, with the exception of the community of the Center Plaza. Those 5 positions are in a separate fund, and then you can see on the left the breakdown by division. And this is what it looks like in a bar chart. And this kind of shows you the history over the last 4 years and then the proposed. So back in 1920, we had 58 3/4 positions. The following year, we experienced a reduction as a result of the elimination of 2 positions and the outsourcing, I guess, of the Convention and Visitors Bureau, and then we stayed steady. This fiscal year, we got 9 new positions, which is why you see the jump, as well as a position in parks planning, so that really made it 11. And then we will be receiving 1 additional position in this coming fiscal year. All right, let's look at the money. So the Parks, Recreation, and Neighborhoods Department has 4 different funds. We have the general fund, we have TRIP, we have the Community Center Fund, which is Center Plaza, and we also have golf. So you can see here a very basic summary of the last 4 years of revenues and expenses. 2021, clearly those are COVID years, so you can see our revenues are pretty low, 2.9, 2.5. 22, we started to experience some recovery. Again, this year we're still experiencing recovery, but I do have to say we're not 100% back, and maybe we won't be the way we were pre-pandemic, but we'll be different. Our expenses are also reflecting the COVID years. Tuolumne River Regional Park, you can see the same holds true for them. This year, you will see that the revenues jump significantly, and that is primarily due to, I'm sorry?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, to insurance payment from American Legion Hall. And the expenses are also increasing as we work hard to get the park cleaned up and make repairs and increase our staffing there. Golf Fund, So the golf fund is an interesting fund to look at, as the revenues were probably one of the more constant things during the COVID years. You can see from 20 to 21, revenues actually went up $600,000. Continued to increase in 22. We're expecting a little bit of flattening during this fiscal year, not only because golf is kind of flattening out as we return to normal, but haven't we had some rain since December, so that's obviously impacted the golf revenue. The community center fund, clearly it was impacted by COVID. We did recover some money from FEMA, and you'll see that in the 22 and 21 and 22 areas, which it looks like we were generating some revenue, but it was really more payment for operation of the vaccine center. All right, so this is the expense and revenues by division. And so within the administration and facility funds, there also is the general fund, the golf fund, and the center plaza fund. So to look at this and say, how is there $4 million in revenue in the administration? It's because center plaza, golf are located there, and that's also explains the significant expenses. All right, we'll move on to the recreation services. Of course, just as a reminder, this houses Mary Grogan, the Senior Center, King Kennedy, Maddox, and the Airport Neighborhood Center. You can see also in this slide, the revenues were impacted by COVID. They're starting to recover. After-school program is back in play, and we're starting to have some more revenue-generating activity, and the expenses also correspond increasing as our activity grows, returns. This is our park operations. Park operations, interestingly enough, was pretty constant. The primary source of revenues for park operations is direct charges to other departments. There's a small amount of revenue they get from the registration fees associated with rentals in the parks and Mary Grogan. It's not too significant, but you'll see a jump in their budget from 23 to 24 as a result of the 9 new positions that they just received back in February. This is, am I going backwards? Yes.
I think you went backwards.
I don't know. I think
you
it's
go.
this thing is malfunctioning. So anyway,
That's
this
right.
is.
That's the next one.
Huh?
That's the next one.
Did we do Parks Planning
No,
and
you
Trip?
haven't done this one yet.
Okay, I'm on the right one.
Right.
Okay. All right, good. So this is Parks Planning and Development as well as Trip. Our Parks Planning and Development Division facilitates and oversees the operation of Trip. You can see their revenues are increasing this year from 1.1 million to 1.5, and then of course the expenses will be increasing as well. They increased significantly from 22 to this year, and then they're holding steady. This has to do with the growth of activity down there. Now, American Legion Hall is no longer, so we will not be seeing any revenue, but we will be seeing revenue next year from the sale of the Bellanita portion of Trip to the Housing Authority. So that's what you see there. All right, let's see if I can do this. Okay. So this is the fund by appropriation unit by fund. So this is the general fund, and of course, as Steve explained when he started, A is salary and benefits, B is inter-service fund charges, and C is discretionary funds. So you can see from the bar chart that fiscal year 24, the proposed has an increase of approximately $675,000 in the general fund. This is made up of primarily salary and benefit increases, as well as those 9 positions that we talked about earlier that are going to be in park operations. Our ISF funds, I don't even want to say this out loud because they went down a little bit, and I don't think I want anyone to know that. But I think it has to do with some changes that the building services folks have made to how they charge departments for building service costs. And then our discretionary spending went up in appropriation unit C by approximately $450,000. And this is as a result of increases in our contracts, as well as increases proposed or expected in goods and services. Okay. Next one is Community Centers Fund, which is the Modesto Center Plaza. Overall, this budget has declined in expenses in the amount of approximately $55,000. A large part of that reduction is, as I just spoke about, the building ISF charges, that major expenses are no longer covered by building ISF. They have limited the amount they will pay. And just as a note, we have some significant deferred maintenance at the Center Plaza, currently not included in this budget, so we'll probably be back next year or during the year to share some of that information. All right, this is the golf. Am I still doing it?
One more, there you go.
I'm not doing it. I feel it's set up. All right, this is the golf fund. As I said earlier, the most significant increase in the golf fund is in the appropriation C area. As a reminder, the golf courses are operated by two vendors. Brightview maintains the courses and Kemper manages the clubhouse as well as course play. So the primary reason for the increase in appropriation unit C is Kemper's payroll. So we don't pay city staff to run the courses, but we reimburse Kemper for the payroll they pay to locate employees at our courses. We also, you may recall, just approved a contract with a golf cart company to provide new golf carts at both courses, and everybody was happy about that, but the price went up. We should be experiencing revenue increases as a result of that, and everyone knows food and beverage has gone up, so that's basically what makes up the increase in the appropriation unit C for the golf fund. All right. TRIP. So remember, green is ISF, red is discretionary spending. And you can see our green went down pretty significantly, and that is primarily due to the fire that eliminated American Legion Hall. There were some decreases that were related to the American Legion Hall fire, but there was a significant increase in the contract for managing or the landscaping. So we increased the contract with Grover to continue to improve our vegetation management and just the grooming of the park. And we also have some additional money for our ongoing cleanup. We've been working hard on that. I'm sure you're aware, but we plan to keep at it. Some of that includes forestry assistance with our forestry division, as well as use of West Coast arborists for tree and vegetation management. There's also a transfer from $50,000 to the CIP fund for future capital improvements, as well as some ISF costs for fleet. And I think that sums it up. I think I told you earlier, there is an increase in the revenue as it relates to the Housing Authority purchase of the Bellanita property, and then an increase contribution of 4.5% from the city. All right, we made it to the non-Measure H adjustments, and Steve went over these very briefly. The first one is creating a 3/4 time position at the Modesto Center Plaza using part-time salaries, so there's no cost to the community center fund or the general fund for that matter. It's just simply the creation of a 3/4 time position to help support events and create a supervisory level position over the other part-timers. The next item, which is $44,586 to the general fund, is creation of some additional programming in our recreation division, including a tiny tot class, Agents of Discovery class, a winter break day camp daycare, and then increasing a position for our junior Giants softball program from 3/4 to full-time, and that's why you see the .25 there. And then finally, we're asking to fund the Youth Commission $5,000 so that they can do some projects in the next year. We're finishing up their first year, and they've done a great job, and we believe giving them some money for project development will be supportive of their efforts. Okay, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Lori. Any questions from council members or committee members?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation, Lori. I have a question regarding the 2 state grants that the city received to go towards Cesar Chavez Park and Martin Luther King Park. Is that money baked into here, or have we not received those funds?
So those funds will be reimbursed as the projects move forward, and they're not included in this. Those are capital improvement projects. So in the capital improvement program presentation, which will go to the a joint finance planning commission meeting, it'll be part of that.
Great, thank you.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
No questions, thank you.
No questions. Thank you, Lori. We're going to take a 5-minute break. 10-minute break? 10-minute break, great. Thank you, everyone. We'll be back at 6:45. We'll bring it back. Thank you. Councilmember Rosa will be back with us shortly. She had a previous engagement, so she should be here at any time. So moving on to city attorneys or city managers. I think it's city manager.
City manager.
So I don't have a presentation for city manager.
You should have it up there.
City manager, oh, it's at the last, but it should be at the last.
All right.
City manager, Joe Lopez.
Thank you, Chairman Wright. Members of the Finance Committee, I'm going to go over the city manager's budget. So the city manager's office has three different kind of areas, communication and legislative affair. They oversee our legislative platform and our government relations, so they do a lot of work with our state and federal lobbyists, and then also managing our citywide communication, crisis communication, oversee our website, and do all our social media posting as well as community outreach. The main responsibility of our office, though, is to execute council direction and implement the city's strategic plan. We serve at the pleasure of the city council, and it's our job to enact council's direction. We also act as a liaison with other intergovernmental affairs. It's important that we work with our county counterparts as well as our other cities locally here in Stanislaus County, as well as provide oversight to all city departments that are not charter officers. We also have the budget division that's headed by Steve, who gave a great overview this evening. Manage the preparation and ongoing monitoring of our annual budget, as well as forecast revenues and expenditures throughout the year. Our priorities for the upcoming year are fiscal. This is not the right presentation.
That was last year's?
No.
Yeah, there
That's
no?
not it.
Was that it?
That's the old one.
This is the new one.
Do you want a copy?
Yeah.
But they need to see it.
So while Steve is trying to get it back online, I'll continue on. So one of our priorities is sustainable and responsible Measure H spending plan. As I stated in our opening, we take this very seriously. And it's one of the most important things that we have on our to-do list is to make sure that we provide for what was alluded to in our ordinance, and I will remind everybody it's not a specific tax. It is a general tax, but we are following what's in the ordinance because that's what our community identified as being priorities. We also want to make sure that the spending plan is sustainable. This needs to live on into the future so that we can continue to benefit our community. Also, the ongoing implementation of our COVID relief funds. We still have some funds outstanding in our Phase 1 and Phase 2 allocations that will continue to be, that need to be expended. Homeless programs and initiatives. Homeless is one of our #1 priorities, and we continue to put attention to it. Addressing the pension liability. This continues to be an ongoing drain on our general fund expenses. We need to continue to find creative ways to address those needs. The blight abatement strategy. We've made great strides in that area, and we want to continue to focus on it as that has been identified as one of our community's top priorities. Our multilingual communication plan, we implemented Wordly last year, but now we need to continue to focus to translate our documents into other languages as well for easy accessibility for our non-English speaking residents. We continue to look at our downtown parking strategy, comparing on-street versus off-street parking, and seeing what's best for our downtown. We have also kicked off our city property inventory and disposition. This is just taking a look at all the pieces of property that the city owns and deciding what is the best use of those facilities. We've also talked heavily throughout the years of our ongoing deferred maintenance. We are going to want to put together a plan to address those going on in the future. And then lastly is the Forward Together implementation. And while this is a police initiative, much of it will still reside out of the city manager's office for oversight of both the Community Police Review Board as well as the police independent auditor. Oh, I don't have the presentation. For those, you have it? I'll send it to you. We'll make sure that we put this online later for anybody to see it that can match it up to the things that I'm saying. On the next slide is our organizational chart. We have 2 deputy city managers, and then you see the public relations legislative affairs manager. They have 2 FTEs underneath it, and the budget division has 4 FTEs. On our historical staffing chart, I will note on the far right side, you see the 3 in the gray box. That represents the communication division. One of the things that we had done previously is communication was just lumped in within the city manager's office over budget. And so we are separating them out so that we make sure we have better transparency with what's happening in the communication budget. So on the next slide, you can see the revenues and expenditures. Here, it's fine from here. That was the only slide that would have been wrong.
You want to go back to it?
No, you can just use that presentation for the rest of it. All right. Here, I'll go back a little bit since the slide that's wrong is
Whoop, got it.
this slide right here has been updated and it will be on our website. The rest of these coincide with what I had already shared previously. I will note on this slide right here, you see the 3 on the top right corner. That represents the communication division employees. So our department revenue, we have very little revenue. Mainly it's from direct charge agreements from other departments. And the expenditures are mainly in the way of salary and benefits. The budget division, they do occur more revenue because of the direct charge agreements being responsible for the overall citywide budget. We are able to pull from other funds to pay for the services administered by the budget division. And again, the expenditures mainly relate to salaries and benefits. Here is the new communication division. These are just the expenses and the revenue. The revenue, again, this is a citywide department where we cover all funds and we're able to direct charge for services provided in this area. And the expenditures, again, mainly relate to salaries and benefits. Citywide organizational dues and revenues. So this is a separate fund within the city manager's office where we pay for various organizations that we belong to, like LAFCO, League of California Cities, StanCog. All these organizations charge the city various amounts for the service, for us being a part of those services. So you will notice that that dollar amount is a little bit higher or substantially higher than it was in the past. These are mainly to account for the independent police auditor position, as well as for any incidentals associated with the Community Police Review Board. So they will be housed in this fund.
Would this include the JPL for this building?
No, it does not. That's in a separate fund.
Okay.
So this is just an overview of the department expenditures by budget or by our fund type. I kind of went through those verbally. Here is an overview of the total A, B, and C's. Again, nothing out of the ordinary, and these our A's are just up due to the salary increases, and our C's are up mainly due to the independent police auditor as well as Community Police Review Board expenditures. Our non-Measure H adjustment is the 2 fellowships. This does come from ICMA, which ICMA is the International City County Management Association. It's one of the major associations for city managers as well as county executive officers. It's our #1 professional organization. They approached us last year about hosting fellowships in the city of Modesto. Given the budget constraints last year, we didn't feel like it was the right time, but it was something that we wanted to explore. These fellows are graduates of MPA, Master of Public Administration or Masters of Public Policy. They would live in the area for a 1 year's period of time. These are all individuals who aspire to be city managers or chief executive officers and can provide a high level of service to our organization. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, City Manager. Any questions from our committee members?
Yes, on the 2 fellowships, will that include lodging?
The total cost is $50,000. ICMA provides the remaining funding associated with it.
Thank
It's
you.
$50,000 per fellow.
I have a question in
Go
that
ahead,
vein.
Councilman.
It says here graduates from throughout the throughout the country.
Throughout the country.
Okay. There's no preference for graduates from local IHEs, CSUs, UCs?
Well, they would send us individuals to interview, and then we would select the best fits for us. But they have to be graduates of MPAs or MPPs.
Right, but what I'm asking is preference for locals, or is it just on a merit-based qualification?
Yeah, that is not a requirement of their program. It would be a requirement that if somebody local wanted to be a part of that program, I would encourage them to go sign up with ICMA. And I'm fairly certain that ICMA would be sending us people who are local as well.
Gotcha, thank you.
And so when does that opportunity happen for these individuals?
If it's approved in the budget, then we'll be reaching out to ICMA to begin the process.
Thank you.
Great. I have just a question on our communication. How are we going to communicate our Measure H, what we're doing on Measure H to our citizens? I know.
Chairperson Wright, you may be a little ahead of us because you may see it later in the Measure H presentation.
Okay, and then follow up with another question is, there again, I think we're doing a little bit better on communicating what the great stuff that we do here in Modesto to our citizens. However, I think we can do a lot more, and hopefully down the road, we can really give some presentations. Every time I share anything from street teams or camp to home, I'll get 200 or 300 likes on it on Facebook, and you know, that's some great things that a lot of times people, our residents don't really understand what we're doing. They just see what they see in the neighborhoods, but they don't really see what we're actually doing to help people. So that communication is real important, in my opinion. Any other questions from council members? If
No,
not, we'll thank you, City Manager, and then we'll go to City Attorney's office. Welcome.
Good evening, Chair, Commission members, Council member. Jose Sanchez, your City Attorney. I'll be presenting the City Attorney's Office our budget. Let's see. Just before I start, the numbers, I wanted to give a little overview of the office on what we do. The City Attorney's Office, we pretty much handle the daily operations and legal issues related to critical public services. We end up having to obviously be involved in all the agenda items you get. We provide advice to the council and to staff, and you often kind of see me at the council meetings going over different ordinances or definitely providing advice on projects that we worked on. We also appear in court. We appear in court on issues related both to criminal and civil matters. We review documents and requests for public records. I know you'll have your city clerk come up and provide information related to their office and all the public records requests that they handle. We handle them together with them. We also prosecute criminal violations of the Modesto Municipal Code and state law, which includes housing and building codes, business license codes, and crimes involving public peace, morals, and welfare. Now, regarding our goals, I often start with the comment of really our goals are to assist the city, the council, with your goals. I know that previously when your city manager had all the goals that were priority to the city and to the city manager's office, we are, for example, we would be helping on making sure that we could comply, that the city can comply with all the goals, meet those goals, and any legal issues that come up related to such achievements. We also want to obviously continue to provide the services we provide now. One of the big targets or one of the big issues, of course, is to continue assisting with community prosecution and quality of life related matters, such as, and just to name a few, illegal dumping, graffiti abatement, blight, and nuisance conditions. Our second priority or goal, like always, is to effectively manage limited resources. As mentioned previously, this budget does not include any Measure H funding. So we still, when you see kind of the budget throughout the years, it remains pretty similar or pretty flat to what we had last year. Our third priority is really to enhance communication and collaboration. And I always put this up there every year because it is our goal to communicate with the public in a manner that's transparent and straightforward. We always strive to explain the laws in ways that could be understood by both the council staff, but also the members of the public. And we also want to, of course, collaborate with other agencies, local businesses, and citizens, and continue our collaboration to fully explore innovative legal alternatives that could benefit everybody involved. Our org chart, just to remind the committee members, the City of Modesto does have a hybrid approach to your legal services. The city currently has a contract with Myers-Nave to provide city attorney services. I'm with the firm. I'm your city attorney, and we also have several members from my team, from my firm, that provide assistance to the city on specific legal matters. But we also do have folks in the city attorney's office that are employees of Modesto. We do have an attorney, and we have currently 3 staff members that are City of Modesto employees. The org chart has, of course, city attorney. We have an assistant city attorney, a prosecuting deputy city attorney who's in court most of the time with criminal prosecution. We have different advice attorneys that provide advice on all matters, such as elections, finance, employment issues, and also litigation attorneys. And in staff, we also have a paralegal, which is our office manager, another paralegal, which helps with all the public records requests and community prosecution, and we do have an administrative office assistant. The FTE count for the city attorney's office, again, these are folks that are hired by the City of Modesto. These aren't the kind of the attorneys that work with Modesto. These are just the 1 attorney and 3 staff members that we currently have, which are 4 FTEs. And that's been quite a change from 2015-16 when there were 12. And previous years before that, there were even more full-time employees. So as far as the revenues and expenditures, I'll show this graph. And as mentioned before, I believe Committee Member Escudia Braden mentioned the kind of asking the question regarding the graphs. We are also not a department that brings in revenues. Our revenues are mostly direct charge agreements with other departments. But really, what this doesn't account for is, we do assist the other departments that bring in revenues in order to bring those revenues. That's not tracked here. This is just simply the direct charge agreements versus the expenditures. And the expenditures are mostly, you're talking about salaries for the employees that are hired by Modesto. You have the legal services, for example, related to general fund, that we pay for contract legal services, like with Myers-Nave and other firms that provide services. The next slide here is just an expense history of what we have, our A's, our B's, and our C's. As explained, the A's are salary and benefits for employees of the city that are within the city attorney's office. We have the B's, which are the ISFs, and then we have the discretionaries, appropriations, which is C, which those are where the different professional services agreements come from. It's also where office supplies, trainings for staff, and legal subscriptions for individuals, and memberships for individuals that are city employees. As you can see, they're pretty consistent numbers throughout the last couple of years, with the overall budget being very close. We do strive always to come under budget. Last year we were a little over budget. I know as big projects come up like redistricting or other big projects, oftentimes if for some reason we're getting close to our budget, we may be coming back and letting the council know this is why we're going over. Right now it seems like we're tracking well, but we would keep the council apprised of any changes. With that, I will take any questions.
Any questions from council members? I have a question.
Yes.
On lawsuits that the city has that are big lawsuits, is that part of the city attorney's budget, or is that a separate line item that we approve as we get those type of lawsuits?
That's a great question. So when lawsuits involve, when the insurance carrier is involved, that's part of the risk management's budget. That's a different line item. That's not in our budget. There are, however, some cases, some lawsuits that will not fit in. Oftentimes we get, those are usually smaller, and those oftentimes they may be getting picked up by this budget. When an issue like that comes up, like a litigation that would be covered under our budget, we would definitely apprise the council, let the council know that that would be hitting our budget. But usually it's the risk management with the insurance covering.
Okay, great. Any other questions from council members or committee members? Seeing none?
Thank you.
Welcome back, Councilwoman. Thank you. Next is the city clerk's office. Welcome, Diane.
Thank you. Good evening, council and committee members. Diane Ayares Perez, your city clerk.
Thank you.
I'm here to present this evening the proposed budget for fiscal year 2023-2024, and I will start, hold on, with an overview of the city clerk's office. The city clerk's office has three main functions. Responsibilities are city clerk's office, elections, and mail services. Under the city clerk's side, city clerk's office is responsible for the agenda management of city council meetings and city council standing committee meetings. To put into context the volume of workload that we process on an annual basis, we processed 78 agenda packets this past year, and they were all posted in accordance with the Brown Act. We attended and record council and council standing committee meetings. As the agent of service for the City of Modesto, we received claims, summons, and subpoenas, and we received a total of 367 last year. Also, as in the Modesto Municipal Code, there are some duties that set out some auditor duties for the city clerk, and those duties consist of auditing certain fiscal transactions, and that's auditing the payroll, the weekly check register, ACH, and e-payments. Those are processed on a weekly basis, maintain the city charter and the municipal code, and what that entails is anytime the council processes an ordinance, we make sure that it's published in accordance with the Modesto Municipal Code, and that's also incorporated into the Modesto Municipal Code online. We administer oath of offices to new employees, elected officials, and our school board members, along with some certain boards, commissions, and committees. Last year, we did a total of 148 oaths that were administered. As a Political Reform Act officer for the City of Modesto, I received Statement of Economic Interest forms and processed campaign statements. We received a total of 415 last year, published legal notices in accordance with the Modesto Municipal Code and state law, and along as City Attorney Sanchez mentioned, we work closely with his office with processing public records requests, and last year there was a total of about 750 requests. We also are responsible for records management and preservation. Under the election side, the city clerk is the elections official for the city council and the Modesto City School Board elections. Those are mandated by the election code and the city charter. That entails meeting with the candidates during the nomination period, as well as preparing all candidate handbooks and publishing the legally required notices of calling an election and putting together the information reciting the facts of the election. Mail services is responsible for sorting, metering, and delivering mail throughout city departments. I won't read them all, but some of the stops that they make are Modesto Center Plaza, the treatment center, Dryden, Fire Department, Police Department, the airport, a total of about 12 stops. They have a monthly average of 7,000 pieces of mail that they process and about 12,000 pieces of post office mail that they process. About 95% of the city clerk's duties are all mandated through the city charter, municipal code, Brown Act, state law, and the Political Reform Act. So it's very imperative that our department is accurate and that we process things on a timely basis in accordance with the law. Department priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. Here's a highlight of some of our priorities, and they are continue to provide excellent and efficient services to the mayor, council, staff, and more importantly, the citizens of Modesto. Prepare for and successfully manage the March 5th, 2024 mayoral primary election. That nomination period opens November 13th through December 8th. So at the start of the new fiscal year, my office will be very busy putting together them candidate handbooks and putting together the required notices of calling an election. Update the city's website to provide greater ease of accessibility to historical records and documents, to provide more transparency to the public. We have a project, it was estimated to be a 5-year project. It's Project ScanSnap, and so far our Deputy City Clerk Andrea has been able to scan rezos dating back to 1911, and she's slowly working her way back to 1884, and then we'll transition over to the minutes so we can post those online. Digitize microfilmed documents. We have about 179 rolls of microfilm that we would like to digitize. Maintain a records retention schedule and destruction of expired documents. Assist with training staff on inputting documents into DocuSign, and also, more importantly, once the documents are signed, we make sure that they are indexed properly in our document management system. Assist with training staff on the use of our on-base agenda management system. Provide staff with training on use of the new Zoom room. And then making sure that we have efficient staff to handle the increasing workload, make sure we have proper cross-training and professional development to continue to provide efficient, if not better, services to the council and the public and staff, and keep up to date on election laws and any legal updates throughout the year. So org chart in the city clerk's office. So staffing in the city clerk's office consists of the city clerk, which is a charter officer. There are 3 main functions that I mentioned. The first is the city clerk's office. I have an assistant city clerk and a deputy city clerk. There's 1 vacant deputy city clerk that has been vacant since the economic downturn back in 2008. And just point out really quickly and put that into context. So back in 2009, we had a total of 125 public records requests. As I mentioned earlier, we received about 750 last fiscal year. Mail services, we have 2 administrative office assistant ones, and then election services, which is provided by myself. City clerk's revenue outlook. Here's a snapshot of the last few years of our revenue. So typically you'll see, like in fiscal year 1920, we do get some reimbursement from Modesto City Schools when we do administer an election for them, which most of the time we do. There's sometimes when there's not any candidates that are opposed, so we do not bill them. However, This fiscal year, this current fiscal year, we received about $5,600, and the bulk of it was a reimbursement from Modesto City Schools for my time spent on meeting with the candidates and answering phone calls. The proposed revenue for fiscal year 2023-2024 is going to be zero because we have that mayoral election, so we will not be receiving any reimbursement from the school board during that fiscal year. Central Mail Services as an ISF, or internal service funds, that we receive revenue for the cost of the administration of mail services for the departments. That's $252,303 for a total of $252,303 for revenue outlook for the city clerk's office. Department expenditure budget. Again, here's a history of the last 4 years of our expenditures. You'll see that it's somewhat changed very slightly. So city clerk's office, our proposed is $668,786. Elections, and that's because we had added a $250,000 election for the estimated cost for the mayoral election, and that included typically the registrar of voters charges us between $1.18 to $2 per registered voter. So based on last year's numbers of registered voters, it was about 114,000. That's where that estimate came up. And for mail services, expenditures, $346,758. Again, there was a slight increase, and that was due to professional services, and then a negotiated retiree medical leave reimbursement with MCEA, and then a slight increase in fleet operating and maintenance. So the total amount of the expenditures proposed for fiscal year 2023-2024 is $1,265,544. Here's another chart. City clerk office expenditures by appropriation. Again, A is salary and benefits, B is ISF, and C is discretionary. So for city clerk's office, salary and benefits is $481,962. ISF is $47,954, and discretionary is $383,705. Mail services, ISF expenses by appropriation by that department is, again, A is salary and benefits, B is ISF, C is discretionary. For this fiscal year, it's $146,149. Appropriation B is $19,558, and appropriation C is $178,995. And with that, that completes the presentation for the city clerk's proposed budget. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any questions from committee members or council members?
I just think you get the award for speaking the fastest out of all the presentations.
Thanks.
Incredible.
Yeah. We're going
Thank
to
you.
have one more presentation for tonight, the Community and Economic Development Department. And then I just want to give a heads up to public. After this presentation, we'll come back to council members for any comments, and then we'll open up public comment. Welcome, Jessica Hill.
Good evening, Chairperson Wright and Finance Committee. Jessica Hill, Interim Director of Community and Economic Development. So as a brief overview of our department, we're broken up into 6 different divisions. Our administration team looks over the event and special event permits, cannabis permits in our equity program, as well as general administrative assistance to CED. Economic development assists with business attraction, retention, expansion, and really looking into the downtown master plan and the implementation of that. Our planning team reviews advanced and current planning, the general plan, housing element, land use, and zoning, and then oversees both of our Planning Commission and Board of Zoning Adjustment. Our building safety and MPU, or neighborhood preservation unit, ensures that the developers adhere to the city building standards and issue building permits, conduct building inspections, code enforcement. Engineering oversees traffic engineering, sidewalk pedestrian and design, pavement rehabilitation projects, and encroachment permits. And then lastly, our community development division oversees all of our affordable housing and homeless funds, as well as manages all of our community facility districts. So some of our priorities for the next year. For economic development, we're really looking to complete our economic development strategic plan to launch into a series of different business attraction and retention efforts within the city. We also look to form our enhanced infrastructure financing district, as well as this division is managing the contract for Sear World, which is looking at the redevelopment of Muni, as well as the downtown master plan implementation. For planning, some of the initiatives this year is the Southwest Modesto Plan, our housing element, and then our general plan update. And under this specific fiscal year, we'll be focusing on our land use scenarios. For building safety and neighborhood preservation, we have our commercial vacant building inspections, our rental housing safety inspections, and then data-driven code enforcement. Engineering, again, looking to continue to award more transportation construction projects. We're working with assisting utilities for an update to the stormwater guidance manual in order to assist and facilitate development within the city, and then initiate city standard specifications and drawings. And lastly, community development is really to develop that affordable housing realization and production goal, as really create a dashboard to the community so they can see the housing units in the pipeline and where the funding's being spent, and then really fund and leverage federal and state funding sources to plan for 100 new units of affordable housing. So as our org chart, so the Community and Economic Development Department has 72 full-time employees, 3 within economic development, 9 within planning, 20 within building safety and NPU, 18 within community development, and 19 within engineering. Here is an overview of the employee history over the last 5 years. And then what we wanted to do is also break this down into other governmental funds. And so a portion of our department is actually general funded, and then another portion has to do with the different grant funding and is actually covered by an indirect cost rate. And so you can see that there's 33 total non-general fund employees. So as I briefly just described, our department budget's $12.2 million, but a significant portion of that, just under half, is other governmental funds. And so staff charging their time directly to grant-funded projects. Of the $6.7 million considered general fund, it is offset by approximately $3.2 million in revenue that consists of permit-related fees and charging to projects. So now we'll break up the fund by division. And so here's our administration division. Again, this division oversees our entertainment permit process as well as our cannabis program. And it's subsidized by the general fund. This is our economic development division. You can see an increase from 22-23 to 23-24. This is because we had the senior business analyst position actually frozen in 2022, this fiscal year, and we're proposing to unfreeze it for this next fiscal year. Next up is our planning division. As you can see, there is a little bit of change, both in a decrease of expenditures. We don't see that a lot, but we had a lot of retirements within our planning division, and so we're hiring people at a lower level, so a lower benefit and salary cost. And then for our revenues, the previous fiscal year, we actually had a lot of different grant-funded projects that we could charge time to, which will be up in the next fiscal year, so we don't anticipate those charges for next year. Next is our Building Safety and Neighborhood Preservation Unit division. Again, I want to point out the decrease in expenditures. This is due to an ISF charge, and it's specifically regarding liability insurance. And so there was a claim a couple of years ago that actually came off this year, and so that reduced the expenditures for this year. And then we anticipate revenue to really stay flat. There's a slight increase, and most of the revenue is actually obtained by building permits in this division. Land Development Engineering is a subsection of our engineering division. This one is actually subsidized by the general fund. You can see that the revenue is looking to stay about the same. And then the expenditures did go up slightly, and this is due to, again, projecting out professional services contracts that we need in order to help the development community have the service level they need if, you know, that development does happen and those projects do come in. This is the non-general fund, and so this is our transportation engineering division, portion of the division. And so what I want to point out is the revenues and expenditures are supposed to match each year. So it's no net cost at the end of the year. And so we have what's called a benefit rate or an indirect rate that people can, that's added to everyone's hourly rate that we ensure full cost recovery from charging to grant-funded projects. Last up is our community development division. Again, this is the same type of funding mechanisms where, again, we're looking at a net zero each year just to ensure that we have full cost recovery. And these people are charging to their, the affordable housing projects and then the admin costs associated with those projects as well. So this is the expenditures by type of expenditures, and so as you can see, a majority of the type of expenditures are due to the A's and our salaries and benefits. The ISF charges, you can see that there's that about $300,000 difference, and that was due to, again, the ISF charges regarding the general liability, and then the appropriation C's, which are in red, which are just a slight increase. This is it broken down specifically for general funds, and so as you can see, that has stayed flat over the last year. The reduction in the ISF charges that we spoke about, and then just a slight increase in the professional services. Last one is our community development division, and we wanted to, again, break this out because it's non-general funded. For this increase of about $300,000 from 22-23 to 23-24 is we did have a mid-year budget adjustment where we were able to add 2 positions to really ensure that we had enough staff to help manage the funding we were receiving and then leverage the funding we were receiving with state and federal grants. Last is transportation, engineering, and design. Again, this is charging out to grant-funded projects for transportation. A lot of these also are the Measure L projects. And as you can see, from 22-23 to 23-24, we've stayed relatively flat apart from that ISF charge. So for this fiscal year, we're bringing forward 4 adjustments to staffing adjustments to our department. The first one's the business analyst to assist with our economic development division. So our goal within this next year is to really complete our economic development strategic plan and really start having these business attractions and business incentives to really kind of encourage businesses to, develop in Modesto and move here. The goal of this business analyst would be to run those programs as well as be a facilitator for people who are coming in looking to develop and helping them through that full process. The next one's a community development program specialist. This is a non-general fund ask. Again, this additional community development program specialist will really help oversee all of our HUD-funded programs. And so what they'll do is really help look closely at the data and help with those dashboards we were talking about. Is we want to get the good work that we're doing out to the community and the funding that we're leveraging, as well as bring in more sort of leverage funding to our community. Good. The third one is an administrative analyst. This is to help with our administration, and so this is to help departmental support, including Go Modesto, housing production data in both building and planning to, again, start showing that pipeline of housing that we have, and then oversee our special entertainment permit process and really kind of ensure that we have the community support and service that we can for our administrative analyst. Last one is our development services tech. This is to assist with our planning division. And so what we want to ensure is just we have a really good level of service for those people who are coming into the city of Modesto. What we're seeing is we are continuing to see a pickup in people submitting projects for entitlement. And so whereas I think we're going to see a little downshift in our actual building permits, we're seeing people planning for that next round when the economy continues to go back up. And so what we wanted to do was have a full-time person at the counter being able to answer those direct questions to our customers, be open for business licensing, and they can process those the same day, and then make sure that our planners have the time to complete those special entitlement projects, work on our general plan, and work on our major planning documents that we have moving forward. So the proposal is 4 positions with a total of just under 400,000. About 150,000 of that, so 100,000 would be, a non-general fund, and then 50 would be offset by permit fees as well. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. Any questions from committee members? Seeing none, Councilmember Alvarez, you have any questions or anything? No? Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we'll open up for, since there's no questions from the committee members, we'll open up to public comment. Is there any public out there that would like to speak on any of the items that was presented today? I don't see any hands yet. Give you a few seconds here to find the hand button. Seeing none, I'll bring it back here to any public. I don't think we have any public in the house. So any last minute comments from council members or committee members?
I'd like to thank all of the department heads for their presentations tonight. Excellent job. We'll see you tomorrow.
I also echo that. I was really impressed with everyone's priorities. I thought the priorities of the departments were very well thought of. I envisioned every member of that department being able to reflect what their day-to-day contribution is to that priority. I think it's very achievable, and so everyone could identify with it. So I thought the priorities for all the departments were very well done, and just the level of thought that went into just the details in all the presentations was very well done. So congratulations, and thank you everyone for your hard work.
I think my last comment is that I know we have staff that are really dedicated to the city and want to do the best job they can to make our city a greater city than it is. My hat's off to our city manager for having a great team that he's working with, and I'm looking forward to our future. And to that, we're going to adjourn our meeting. We will convene tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. here in the chamber. We are done.